Hey everyone, it's SoloScribe here, and today, as promised, I will begin with the first video in the lore series, The Brotherhood of Steel. Today we'll be talking about the origins of the organization, from the pre-war military unit it was born from, to the establishment of the Brotherhood of Steel after the Great War. Because this topic is so long, as the Fallout universe has so much lore to it, this will be a first part in the history of the Brotherhood of Steel series. As always, please subscribe to my channel if you want to be updated when the other two videos come out, and let's dive right in. In the Fallout universe, technology advances differently, with 21st century life becoming exactly how it was imagined in the 1950s. We have heavy, power-hungry robots which provide labor both domestically and in industry. Nuclear power becomes much more widespread, from its use in robotics to cars, whereas typical consumer technology never really miniaturized the way it did in our world. We see a country living with technological wonders like fusion cells, laser rifles, domestic robots, all juxtaposed with mid-20th century black and white television sets and radios. And this unstoppable consumerism inevitably leads the Fallout world to use exponentially more fuel, energy, and resources. The world became far too small to support this way of life, and the entire world order begins to completely break down. As resources dwindle, tensions rise, and the world enters a period known as the Resource Wars. We'll have another video talking about this later, but for the purposes of this video, we will focus primarily on one part of the Resource Wars. This is called the Sino-American War. The year is 2066, and the Chinese, just as desperate for oil and resources to fuel its economy, invades and occupies Alaska, which is home to what is often described in the Fallout world as the world's last main oil reserves. In response to the invasion, the US formally declares war on China, and luckily for the US, it has just recently had a breakthrough in its power armor project. With the advent of the first crude nuclear fusion cell earlier in the summer of 2066, the US military was able to deploy en masse entire infantry forces equipped with power armor. Power armor in some form is featured in every Fallout game, and it is one of the most iconic pieces of the Fallout franchise. This elite, fusion-powered armor could turn a soldier into essentially a walking tank. In-game depictions show it as highly resistant to radiation. In Fallout 4, it can even be used underwater, implying that it has some capabilities of a self-contained, recirculating air supply system. The US military heavily depended on power armor during its operations to take back Anchorage, Alaska, and it continued using it during their further invasion of the Chinese mainland. However, for all intents and purposes, the Sino-American War quickly turned into a bloody stalemate, with both sides turning to increasingly desperate tactics in some attempts to gain advantage. One of these tactics was the use of biological weapons from the Chinese. In an effort to counter this, the US government contracted the company Westech to develop a generalized immunization agent against the Chinese biological weapons. The goal of this project was to develop a viral fragment that could be used to alter the host's DNA to make it broadly immune to any possible classical viral infection. This is where the world of Fallout fully embraces its science fiction side, and so much of what goes on in the future of this game universe is directly linked with this moment and this Pan-Immunity Virion project. This Pan-Immunity Virion, or PIV, was developed initially by Westech, and it was used as a viral treatment in which the host's double helical DNA was physically altered into a quad helix form. This would make viral infections classically virtually impossible, but this quad helix form also had the added effects of increased genetic stability, lower rates of replication-induced mutation, and an incredible radiation resistance, with no mutation found in base pair sequences of radiation-exposed tissue. So clearly the scientists at Westech were onto something, but with everything in Fallout, however, this amazingly promising scientific breakthrough, which has the potential to rid the world of all viral diseases, make people highly radiation resistant, and slow down the effects of aging, was used instead as the starting point for a new and terrible biological weapon. This weapon was called the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV. You see, another side effect noticed by the scientists at Westech was a significant increase in muscle mass and overall growth of the hosts. This attracted the attention of the military liaison of Westech, a man called Major Barnett. On March 21, 2075, Major Barnett immediately ordered further studies on the weaponization of the PvP, which is now designated as the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, project. Seeing this virus as the future of human evolution and as a possible way of engineering super soldiers, much larger in size, increased muscle mass, genetically immune to biological weapons, and highly radiation resistant, FEV-altered soldiers could become a major advantage to the US Army in the war against China. However, knowing the importance of the FEV project and fearing sabotage or theft from Chinese spies, Major Barnett ordered all FEV research to be transferred to one single Mariposa military base in January of 2077. The Mariposa military base was a top-secret facility located in Central California. The site was chosen as the hub for FEV research. The Defense Department moved in a military team to provide security to the project under the command of Colonel Robert Spindle and Captain Roger Maxson. It's important to note that this military team was not actually informed about the nature of the work being conducted at Mariposa. They were only given the orders to protect the facility. This secrecy actually kept the peace at Mariposa for several months, until eventually the truth was revealed. Sometime in the beginning of October of 2077, soldiers in the military unit discovered that the scientists were using prisoners as test subjects for the FEV project. The situation at the base began to quickly deteriorate, with Colonel Spindle locking himself in his office, presumably having a breakdown of sorts, leaving Captain Maxson to handle the situation alone. After seeing the results of some of these experiments and horrified at the conduct of the scientists, the tensions began to rise even more until they reached a boiling point on October 12, 2077, when a soldier in Roger Maxson's military unit held a scientist at gunpoint. Captain Maxson stepped in time to stop a murder, but also ordered the interrogation of the scientist. The scientist, under Maxson's interrogation, explains to Maxson that they were all simply following orders, that they were in fact using live humans as test subjects, but that the entire project was government-sanctioned, perfectly legal, and time was crucial. Refusing to believe what he was saying and horrified at the results of the experiments, Captain Maxson killed the scientists. This was the event that really sealed his fate, securing his role as the leader of this Mariposa rebellion, and later as the leader of the Brotherhood of Steel. Colonel Spindle didn't last long, though. After soldiers finally broke into his office, he committed suicide. And further interrogations of the scientists at the base all gave Captain Maxson the same story, that the government had sanctioned these experiments, that the project was crucial to the war effort, and one by one, the scientists were executed by Maxson and his military rebellion. At this point, Roger Maxson must have started believing the scientists that the US government was behind these experiments. After going weeks without really hearing any reaction from Washington, Captain Rogers came to the ultimate conclusion that yes, these experiments were sanctioned and that no one was going to care, understand, or tolerate the conduct of his military unit. On October 20th, 2077, Captain Maxson, with very little other options, officially declared his secession from the United States on behalf of his unit. But strangely, despite murdering an entire group of West Tech and government scientists, despite occupying a US military base and declaring secession, no response ever came. At this point, Roger Maxson ordered the families of his soldiers to shelter within Mariposa, and it's a great thing he did that, because on October 23rd, 2077, the Great War finally began. Mariposa, being a top-secret and remote facility, was largely unaffected by the bombs. This suggests that the Chinese didn't actually know about it, or they knew about the FEV program, but they didn't know the specifics on where the research was being conducted. However, despite this, Roger Maxson didn't trust the situation, and fearful of either a further Chinese attack or some kind of response from the remaining forces of the US military, he ordered the preparation for an exodus from Mariposa on October 24th. Atmospheric readings were taken on October 25th, which showed no dangerously high levels of radiation, and on October 27, 2077, the exodus from Mariposa finally began, as Maxson's team headed to Loss Hills government bunker. The exodus wasn't completely smooth, however. There were a few casualties from both the rugged environment and by desperate marauders that attacked the caravan. Among those that were lost was Roger Maxon's wife, but not importantly, his teenage son, who survived the attack. Upon reaching the Lost Hills bunker, they made themselves a permanent base and gradually expanded it to become their post-apocalyptic headquarters. Now, it's really interesting in this moment to imagine what is going on in the mind of Roger Maxon. He must feel completely betrayed by his country, by his superiors, and at the same time, he's completely isolated himself from everyone. He knows that if the US military is still fighting the war, that the US government is attempting to restore order, that he and his men will undoubtedly be charged with treason and probably executed. The US military is their enemy, as well as the Chinese when they were at Mariposa. This perspective really helps understand and explain why Roger Maxon did what he did, and why he was so desperate to start the Brotherhood. He and his unit, they needed security. His group and family were probably being hunted, and for all he knew, members of the US military were still around. At Lost Hills, they had security, but they were very shaken. They were shaken by the total destruction of the world, by the desperation of the nuclear wasteland as evident in the marauders that attacked them, and by the horrific actions of the US government. The morale at Lost Hills in the first few years after the war was understandably very low, and Roger Maxon, as their leader, had a responsibility to keep them together. For this reason, he decided that they needed a new ideology. They needed a new banner to replace the American flag that they fought for. They needed new symbols, ranks, goals to replace the old one that had betrayed them. And to this end, Roger Maxon developed this new ideology, free from the broken promises of the past, and with the new promises that the horrors that were unleashed on the world would be forever destroyed, that no one, no organization, no country, no institution would ever be allowed to play God with technology again. This right here is really the moment the Brotherhood of Steel was created, as planned by Roger Maxon and his ideologies in the year 2082. It has a strict code of behaviors, it has religious reverence for technology, and it develops into a quasi-religious hierarchical order with absolute authority given to its elders. From this point on, the Brotherhood would strive continuously not to restore order to the wasteland, not to directly help the reconstruction of America or the people living here, but instead to secure any pre-war technology that may be abused, and to prevent the development of any new technological abominations from being created and exploited. The Brotherhood will uphold these values for centuries and seek to expand across the former United States in order to prevent any abuse of technology at any cost at all, even when it means war. But for now, the Brotherhood, as it stands in the 2080s, is merely a single rogue military unit with a mission. Now that they've proved their ability to survive in the wasteland, they pivot their attention to a new goal: to prevent the abuse of technology in post-war America by any past, current, or future organization. And this right here, this goal, is where I think the Brotherhood is often misunderstood in the Fallout games. When you play any of them, there's a natural, almost frustration with their organization. Like, they're sitting around with all this firepower, all this technology, and have the means to possibly provide order to the wasteland, whereas the rest of the wasteland is total chaos, and yet they do nothing. They stick to this very narrow goal of preventing the abuse of technology, and oftentimes this goal comes at the detriment to growing civilizations in the wasteland. In a way, the Brotherhood's overall effect on the wasteland, whether a net positive or a net negative, is a very active and heavily debated topic. In either case, the Brotherhood itself will also disagree internally with their mission. In later videos, we will explore the various factions of the Brotherhood of Steel throughout the years, and we see that some are more sympathetic to the plights of the Wastelanders than others. On the other hand, some factions will prefer to remain totally in the shadows and continue their mission. And some factions, while they don't care too much about the people in the Wastes, are at the same time definitely not shy about interfering with, or even waging war against any other faction in the Wasteland that they don't trust. We'll go over plenty of this in the future, and in the next video we will continue the history of the Brotherhood of Steel, beginning with its contact with the Appalachia Army Ranger Lieutenant Elizabeth Taggarty, and the events of Fallout 76. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks.